to the St. Croix River Valley Holistic Practitioners Show for your health. I'm Anita White and I'm a member of the Alliance. I'm here today with Joni Polehna, and both of us are members of this wonderful practitioners group that helps healing throughout the valley. And today we're going to be talking about post-traumatic stress. So I want to say welcome, Joni.
Great, Anita. Thanks. It's good to be here.
Good, good. So today we're going to talk a little bit about post-traumatic stress. We don't have a lot of time, and I know that we can't cover the whole gamut of the,
it's big.
You know, of the state or the illness. And so Joni, tell me what you know about post-traumatic stress.
Okay. Well, you know, I was thinking back about this when you called today and said, oh, God, how many avenues should I go down here with this? It's kind of interesting to me that recently there's a group called the NICABOM. I don't know if you've ever heard of NICABOM, National Institute for Cognitive and Behavioral Medicine. In 2010, I think, because this will be the third series they're putting on, they've put together experts in the field of cognitive and behavioral medicine. So we're talking the gurus from around this nation, and a few of them might even be from other countries, I'm not sure. But they've talked about what happens when we get into a stressful state. Where do we put it? How does it go there? How do we deal with it? How do we not deal with it? All those kinds of things that really define who we are. And I was just looking back over some of the information that they were talking about, and several of the speakers pointed to the fact that it starts before we're even conceived, which is kind of interesting. But you know, we all know our DNA download. We talk about that. Oh, my family's got heart disease, or we've got diabetes, or we've got, you know, an illness of some sort that's somewhere on the line, and I'm sure I'm going to get it because that's been handed down through generations. And when we get that DNA download, it sets us up with a worldview. So when you talk about, okay, where does this stuff come from? Well, we got a download from mom's side of the family, we got a download from dad's side of the family, and it's together. We're putting it together in one little body here. And we get that download because we're going to need to live in this family. At least that's the natural part of it. You know, I'm born to this family, so I'd live within this family. So what we get as a download are those pieces that will help us be able to live in this family and sort of think like the rest of them think, if that makes any sense. Because it doesn't always make sense, but when we're born then, we've already got a world view. We've got a picture of how the world is probably supposed to be because of what mom and dad handed us and their lineage. I mean, it's not just mom and dad, but it's, you know, down through the generations. So I find that very interesting because then we've got this worldview and it's looking for stuff. And guess what? They're starting to prove more and more that when we're looking for it, we find it. Well, if we've had a history of family members that have experienced a lot of trauma, we're going to be looking for that trauma too. I think my mom had some trauma with dogs or something. Because I'm telling you, I got a download to be afraid of dogs. And have I been afraid of dogs? And so I go out for a walk and I'm looking for dogs, and guess what? I find them.
Yes. Yes.
I don't want to find them. Oh, I hate them. Yeah. But I find them, or I had found them. I've helped myself get past that now. But other people would say to me, that's funny, that dog came up to you, but he didn't come up to us. Yeah, right, because I'm looking for it, because I want to be afraid of it, because somewhere along the line, somebody in my lineage had a trouble with dogs. So I'm looking for it, and I find it, and then we store it. So when we talk about, so where's it coming from? It goes back kind of a long way. But now I've got my own experiences. Every time I'm out walking with somebody, the dogs are coming up to me, right? And making me more afraid. So it's telling me, yep, you better be afraid of those dogs. Oh yeah, you got that picture you're looking for. You better be afraid of them. Bam, I am. And every time they come to me, I store it in my system somewhere because our old amygdala back here, the midbrain, is always looking for danger and always trying to keep us safe because our bottom line is survival. And if that amygdala is looking for negative things to keep us away from, we're always looking for the crap. We're always looking for the awful things to go on in our lives. and then they happen, and we store them. Okay, that's my take. You asked me one simple question, and
right.
I ran with it. So,
That's all right.
what do you think about it?
Post-traumatic stress has had a lot of different meanings to me.
And I didn't exactly go into post-traumatic stress, but I did talk about how we store trauma,
right.
and that's the piece I was talking about.
Right.
Okay, so continue on.
And mine has been just like from personal experience.
Okay.
Where there were situations in my life where I was victimized, and I understand that in a real deep way when you're talking about that, because I came into the world and had a family system where it didn't support, I don't think, anyone. And I'm pretty sure because my parents had been traumatized. Both of them were single. They were raised by single parents, and the absent parent was alcoholic. But there was still systems in their, emotions and spirituality and how they ate and what they thought and how they behaved and how they treated children, that they just brought that forward to the next generation.
Absolutely.
And so having violence and, being hurt a lot by not just my parents but other people because they didn't know how to react to things or, deal with anger or deal with fear, that it was a lashing out. And then I was in a foster home where, it was a different kind of family system, and of course I didn't get that download, so I was operating primarily just trying to figure out how to stay safe in that environment, stay alive. And my foster father was a Pentecostal preacher, and so I had a lot of, just always insistent on learning how Jesus did it, how Jesus did it, how Jesus did it. And at the same time being sexually abused and then being shamed by my foster father is the problem.
Oh,
so
boy.
then I was, spiritually victimized.
Oh my gosh, Anita, I'm
it's-
sorry.
it's-
Holy smokes.
Yeah.
That's
And then I married somebody who is alcoholic. Oh my God, how usual.
yeah,
Because
right.
I would definitely draw someone that would have the same kind of genetic field around them.
Sure.
That in our families were really the same. I mean,
Sure.
there was a lot of things that were identical about our families. And so when I came to a point where I couldn't handle anymore and I really felt like I was going to crash and burn, I surrendered and asked God for help. And that was my simplest, easiest prayer. And instantly there were a number of things that shifted. And as I started in a therapeutic process, I was introduced to this idea of post-traumatic stress disorder and what symptoms there are, where the fight or flight mechanism turns into anxiety, unresolved fears and phobias, allergies, headaches. People store them in their bodies. We've got 28 people in our holistic practice, and they all have people they're working with. There's 7 million people in our country that have been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress.
Oh, I didn't know it was that large.
And what about the people that have not been diagnosed because something happened when they were 5 or 10 or 9?
Yep.
Where it wasn't something that was documented that they were a vet coming home.
Right.
And how many of those vets left here being traumatized by their family, getting the hell out of there, and then ended up somewhere else where they were, even more traumatized.
Yes.
So in
Absolutely.
the genetic storage, it comes out psychically, where it tuned in constantly about what everything else is going on around us, so we can step out in front of something that will harm us and get out of the way. So it's almost like we're operating from that instinct that like an animal would have when their predator is after them. We feel that way.
Yes.
That's how I felt in that post-traumatic state.
Yes.
Where I had the fear and the anxiety and the loneliness and the desperation and depression. And many years I used drinking and drugs and men to try and, take away that, and it did. It fused it down quite a bit.
Okay.
But eventually I had to deal with the neurology and the thinking about what was going on there. So I have been learning more and more about neurolinguistic programming, and if we break it down, neurology, and you and I are, I think, on the same page. Our neurology really controls everything in our body. We have this area in our life where we can see clearly and we can think clearly. Probably 7 bits of information. That's scientifically we can see or know 7 bits of information in any given second. Well, unconsciously, in our bodily functions, growing our hair, changing our cells, there's 12 million bits of information going through our brain at one time.
Sure.
So we have that going on, and then we've got this higher consciousness, and I look at it like it's the screen on your computer, and then you've got the hard drive, which is your neurology, running all your systems.
Automatically.
You've got all these files in there from your family history with your values and your beliefs and your memories, and how you see time, how you are in the world. And then there's the higher consciousness where I'm understanding some things about you and the other person, and maybe what this higher God thing is trying to get to me. And so neurologically there's all this stuff going on. And so to be able to kind of come in with language and change some of the neurology by the words that are said and how they're said, that's why hypnosis is effective. Because there is this artfully vague language that's used that helps us shift our neurology. Now, Joni, I've gone in and had a couple of treatments with you. I've watched my son go through some treatments with you, and my significant other went in and went through some treatments with you. And your way is more with your body.
More physical.
Your body is going to realign your neurology and your systems with the genetics and with past life experiences and the ancestry and lineage on both sides.
Sure.
And the way that I work with it is more with words. It's changing the pattern of how we're saying things and what we can put down on paper and change linguistically. And then the way that we communicate back and forth and the way that I communicate with clients, it's like there's a shift because my words will do what your body language and what your techniques
with the physical kinesio.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the programming, it's like, well, it's kind of like computer programming.
Yeah.
Our brains were the best computer in the whole wide world until they started developing them. And they were patterned after our brains and how things were working.
Yeah.
So for us to say, it's scary, neuro-linguistic programming, that's a really big word. But when we break it into our thinking, and our language, and then learning how to process things differently and how to understand and think things differently. It's really pretty basic.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I know that there's a lot of ways that people can get help from post-traumatic stress.
Yes.
And I just want to encourage the audience, if you have something that has hurt you and you know that it's hurt you, reach out to anyone. Go to our practitioner's website and find somebody you feel like you connect with. And really start working on that because you can release that. And you can have a fuller, happier life and whichever works best for you. There's different ways that we approach and do things, and some of it is Eastern medicine and some of it's a combination of the therapeutic process and Western medicine.
Absolutely.
So we have a way of treating mental health problems, without having to go and get a med. Without having to go get an anxiety drug, without having to get a depression drug or something to sleep, that we can really retrain our thinking and our bodies to understand things differently so we're not in that heightened state of fight and flight all the time.
Exactly.
And I didn't even know I was doing that until I was
of course
so
not.
defensive all the time, defensive. Somebody would say something and I was sure I was wrong. Everything they said about me, and it was like, you weren't even talking about me.
Yeah.
I was taking it so personal because I was sure someone was out to harm me.
Sure.
It was that, in me.
Well, yeah, because your amygdala was working and saying, hey, I'm here to survive and I got to take care of this or I'm not going to survive. Yeah, absolutely.
So tell me, Joni, I know that you've treated some folks and maybe veterans. Do you want to talk about that some?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that happens is we store the image or we store the emotional component or we store maybe a spiritual hit, we store those things in our system. And it can be one or it can be all three. But the part that's so important, I think, is that we need to identify what it is and then move to release that piece from the system. And for the most part, we don't really want to forget that something happened to us because, it really weaves the fabric of who we are, and that's important. Doggone it, I made it through that. I'm not going to write that off. That gave me strength. What doesn't kill us makes us stronger. And so we don't want to forget all those things. We certainly want to be able to move forward with them. But one of the things that I have found a lot of is that an emotional piece, how we feel about that hit, whether it was spiritual, physical, or emotional, we have an emotional response to it most of the time. And it's that emotional piece that keeps us stuck. And we store that somewhere in our body. So, as you know, one of the techniques that I use pretty frequently is called EFT tapping. And I'm going to be doing a show on that coming up too, so people can kind of look for that down the road. But it's based on the idea that Eastern medicine, if we move back to that, there are 14 energy meridians in the body, 14 major ones. We have lots of them, but there are 14 major ones. And every one of those really pertains to an internal organ or a part of our system. But each meridian stops and starts somewhere. So for instance, the lung meridian starts about here, travels up the arm, zigzags around, and comes out the side of the thumb. Okay? Now, we don't necessarily know if you've had a trauma, if you stored it there or not. Yeah. We don't really know that piece. Yeah. So the design of emotional freedom technique tapping, or EFT, is to tap on the 14 energy meridians, the major energy meridians in the body, to release whatever our intention is. So we actually put our thoughts on the upset. So when you were talking about veterans, this technique is actually being now considered one of the best pieces to help veterans. And they're putting together a veterans resource system at the national level. And emotional freedom techniques tapping is on that list of best method practices, which is huge and wonderful. There are quite a few pieces now, videos and stories, documentation about how this kind of work has helped veterans move from that constant state of hypervigilance and trauma. Because if the brain can't get rid of the pictures, the whole system says, what, are we still there? Because the mind doesn't know the difference between highly imagining something or holding that picture here and actually doing something. It doesn't know the difference. So when that picture keeps running through of all the traumas that someone may have experienced through war, and it might not even have been that they were in that situation, they could have heard the story of someone else who came back from a war situation. And if they heard that and were traumatized by that, that's enough. They don't have to have gone through it themselves. But when you are in a situation where you don't feel safe, you are in hypervigilance all the time. And you're going to store every little piece of information that is going on around you, because you may have to react to something you saw, felt, or heard later on. And so you have to be hypervigilant. And when you're in a state of always watching your back and everybody else's back, when you leave that, you have learned how to do that, and it's become a part of you. And we have to unlearn that. We have to learn how now I'm not in that unsafe place. I now can re-establish safety in my own system. And we need to help veterans and other people work to re-establish that safety. You know, you were just talking a minute ago about some pretty heavy-duty trauma that you went through. And anybody would stop and say, holy smokes, are you kidding me? Of course you have PTSD of some sort. Yeah. But PTSD can happen with minor little things. And it's always amazing to me when parents will bring a child in and they'll say, oh, I don't think that bothered them. And we can ask the child who says, are you kidding me? Yeah. I thought I was going to die. Yeah. You know, we can't really say what somebody else's trauma is, because we don't know. We don't know that downward lineage. We don't know what's been handed to us and what we're looking for. But what can seem like a minor situation to one person may be a major, major issue. My post-traumatic stress was falling out of my high chair when I was 18 months old. And they were the old metal high chair trays, you know, and it flipped and I landed on the top of it. And I cut my nose. And I didn't, until I started doing this work, I didn't understand that that was a huge trauma for me. I think there's even a little research right now that speaks to the fact that if you've had a trauma prior to the age of 3, a major trauma prior to the age of 3, you may be a more hypersensitive person to those kinds of things that are going on in life after that time. Because if you have a verbal ability to talk about it, that can help you let go of it. And if you are at the age of 3, you now have more of a cognitive memory. Around the age of 3 is where scientifically we form enough synapses across the corpus callosum. And once we have that and language, we're better able to process what's going on. But prior to that, they think it really stays with us. Right. So of course, you know, if I go back and I think about that whole trauma for me, and granted, I've had other things that have gone on through life, but certainly they don't measure up to some of the things you've talked about, or the Vietnam vet, or a war vet.
Your trauma is your trauma.
My trauma is my trauma.
Any more than your pain, because you're experiencing your pain. I'm not experiencing your pain.
Exactly, exactly. And in those kinds of situations, it's hard to walk a mile in your shoes.
That's right.
I'd like to be able to, but I don't quite understand that from your perspective. So one of the things that I really like to do is to help people release that emotional charge, which is that part. You know, because you can see somebody that you had a disagreement with, or someone who victimized you, and we get that going on.
Well, the scent.
The scent,
cologne,
you bet.
The same, you know, smell. My dad smoked cigars. I literally want to throw up if I smell a cigar.
Sure.
I mean, and I realize that's why I just don't hang around people who smoke cigars. But it is.
Yes.
It is, and I wouldn't know that.
Yeah.
You know, hadn't I done some work with someone
You
and,
bet.
you know, sounded it off, where they said, what did you see? What did you hear? What did you smell? Tell me more about that. How
Sure.
did that go? What else were you experiencing? You know, where did you feel that in your body when that
Sure.
happened? You know, so you have a sense of connection with, you know, not just that I think it and it's a memory.
Right.
It's that there's all this other emotional, physical stuff that is connected to that will serve as a reminder out in the environment.
To keep you safe.
That's
Better
right.
stay away
And
from it,
stay
because that's
safe.
dangerous.
And, you know, and one thing that I, you know, have realized too is, you know, and I've talked to a lot of vets, and they have a regiment. The first day at boot camp, they lose control over everything they do.
Right.
You know, they go to the bathroom at one time, they take a shower at one time, they go out and exercise and do whatever they are told to do. So they have this structure, and however long they're in there, they have a structure every single minute of every day of their life.
Yes.
So they've learned not to be in control.
Yes.
And so when they come out, they have to be in control of everything.
Yeah.
So there's a switch that happens, and I hope that somewhere there's development of a transition period where people really can get some, you know, whether it be a retreat place or a transitional housing where they can have, you know, that time to like have still some regiment and some predictability and structure, and, you know, have someone waking them up and putting them to bed or whatever in order to get, you know, some of that here.
Sure.
Because when they come home, it's like, okay, where's the chocolate and the booze, man?
Right. Oh,
You know,
yeah.
And whatever, and to be uncomfortable because they're not they don't have the pattern and the rituals there.
Absolutely.
So everything is uncomfortable, as well as having the sensory things that happened while they were there.
Yes.
And the images and the thoughts and the, you know, when I'm telling you about my story, we were a perfect example of that empathy that we feel for each other as human beings.
Yes.
That, you know, it was like you could for a moment feel that trauma and that pain that I have.
Right.
Well, can you imagine if someone has not been out on the front line?
Right.
And they're in a hospital treating people that have been. They're seeing the physical disabilities, they're seeing the trauma, they're hearing the trauma, they are experiencing the trauma that person has, and then multiply it by everyone they're helping in there.
Yes, absolutely.
So it's not just the people that are, you know, have experienced it, but the people that are around them that have been like taken for the ride as well.
Yeah.
You know, so if your child has been sexually abused, oh my God. Right? Or if your mother was hit in a car accident, how do you feel? So there's a ripple effect of those situations as well.
Absolutely.
And so it's so important to know that it's not something that you just have to cope with, that you really can live and thrive in this world, but really have to put some intention and look at the structures that are in our, you know, world, that we can go and get help from other people like you or me or other people in our, you know, holistic practitioners group that will really facilitate the healing, and that it can be from a higher source.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
that we don't do this alone, that, you know, we can honor people with love and, you know, respect and process those feelings and those things, and then try and find a way, you know, a technique. And, you know, you were talking about EFT, and I've seen some of that really work. I mean,
Yes.
because of my son.
Yeah.
But I've also, seen techniques work with the neuro-linguistic programming,
Yes.
which we're calling NLP.
Absolutely.
And the VA has been doing a lot of studies, and it's been in front of Congress to actually add that as a Western medicine modality for
Good.
treatment.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of research that's happened, and really what it is using creative visualization techniques where we're bringing them to it and then away from it, and then breaking their state so they're not in it, and then having a way of helping them guide their imagery where they're in control.
Marvelous.
So it's not all meditation and it's not all
No.
visualization. Some things are just, walking a path one way and walking a path the other way, talking about the problem, walking a path the opposite way. So there's little practices that we can do that will just shift our thinking, and then the charge is there. You're talking about that feeling, holding that feeling.
Mm-hmm.
I call that the charge, because as soon as you, say something to me that is a reminder of that, I'm like on
Yep.
that defense.
That's right.
So how do we relieve that?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that's using our holistic practitioner techniques along with Western medicine.
Absolutely.
So, it's not. There's no reason why we can't be married.
Yeah. No,
Right.
no, and we need to
Yeah,
be.
that's
Absolutely.
right. That's
Yes.
right.
We've just kind of stopped handing down the natural kinds of things that people used to do all the time.
Right.
And we need to get back to doing some of those things so we take
Right.
responsibility back for ourselves. Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. So
Are we coming to the end of the
I think we're
program?
kind of to the end of the program,
right.
Anita, but this was an
Okay.
interesting conversation.
Okay.
Thanks for having
has
it with
been.
me.
Yes, this has been wonderful.
Yeah.
I felt so much fire in my belly this morning that it was like, we have to do this today. We
Marvelous.
really have to do this today. So I'm Anita White, and I'm with the St. Croix River Valley Holistic Practitioners Alliance. You can find us at rivervalleyholistic.com or find us on the River Valley Holistic channel on YouTube. We have some videos already out there. We have 28 practitioners in our alliance, and we would all love to serve you with kindness, love, and hope. And come back and watch us again on our show For Your Health.